Right, we're in lesson 5 today. The lesson is titled, I Can Make Wise Use of My Time. When you take a look at how many hours in a week, how many hours are in each week? Does anyone know? Or can have a calculator and figure out quickly?
24 times 7?
Well, it's 24 times 7, so how many hours is that?
175 minus 7 is 4...
168, right?
168.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other
yeah.
168.
Yeah, you were doing that. You were doing the proper math. It's 10:03. It's 10:03 on Sunday morning. So, the 168 hours, barring gourd. Gourd doesn't count. How many hours of sleep do you usually get a day? Gourd doesn't count. Six, 7 hours. So you take, all right, so if you get 7 hours sleep a night, times 7, that's 49 hours. So you subtract 49 hours. How many hours do you work a week?
Except gourd.
No, well, except gourd. Again, except gourd. Gourd's strange. Typically, what is a day of work?
40 hours a week.
So 8 hours a day. So that's 40 hours a week. Plus, usually you can put in an hour of travel both ways. So that comes to 45 hours a week if you work 5 days a week. So you subtract that. So now we're up to 45 and 49 is 94 hours.
Well, actually, travel's more like 2-3 hours a day.
Well, it depends where you live. If you're in Toronto, you can probably add another hour a day. And so, but we're up to 94 to 100 hours. So that's 68 hours left if we just round to 100. 68 hours left of our week, of which maybe 3 of them we spend with the church in worship or Bible study, of which we're going to spend time cooking food, eating food. We're going to spend time with our family. So, yes, 168 hours sounds like a lot, but when you boil down how much time you actually have after you do what would be necessary things, you could boil it down to probably about 50 hours. And so when we say, I can make wise use of my time, what do you do with those remaining hours of the week after you've done the things that are necessary to live? And so let's look at some scriptures and figure out what the scriptures tell us. So the first question I have is, what does Paul say about the past? If we're in Philippians 4, we're about to study this on Wednesday night this week, but we'll get it today. That's
Do you want Philippians 3?
Philippians 3, yes. I was going to say that's not right. 3:13. Thank you, because so that's a typo. Philippians 3:13 would be much better at this. So let's get Naomi to read Philippians 3:13.
Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead.
All right. So, what does Paul say about the past? But why do you forget it? Why do you forget it?
Because you can't claim it back.
It's done. It's done. Now, that doesn't mean Paul says you don't learn from the past. Like as far as we like when we say forget the past, what Paul's saying is don't dwell on the past. You can't change it. And so that's what I often tell people. They fret about things that have already happened. I'm like, well, you can't change that now. Learn from it. Don't try to make the same mistakes again. Do what you can to fix what we'll talk about in a second. But you can't change the past. It's done. We don't have time machines where we can go back and change it. Did you have something, Bill?
Yeah, I just wondered too, he just spoke about who he was.
Yeah.
Who he had to be.
Yeah.
Pharisee, this and that. He's forgot that.
Yes.
He's put that behind him.
Yeah.
Also, hasn't he?
When you think about that, why was that important for Paul? to put in the past the fact that he was a Pharisee and a Jew and even a persecutor of the church.
So he didn't think he was greater.
So either he didn't think he was greater than, which is really important, because under the law you could come along. Well, if the law was important, then you can say, well, I was a Jew, I was a Pharisee. Look at me. In fact, Paul's trying to combat that very argument in Philippians 3. But also, to come across on the other side, he was a persecutor of the church. He's not less than a Christian either. And so it didn't matter the things in the past as far as him being a Christian in the present. We sing the song sometimes, "Just as I am." Well, we come to Christ just as we are. We're poor, we come to Christ poor. We're rich, we come to Christ rich. We are a woman, we come to Christ a woman. We're a man, we come to Christ a man. And everything in between. Doesn't mean we can, on certain things, stay just as we are. We can't stay a sinner and become a Christian. We have to repent and change our hearts. But we don't change our status in life. We don't change what we are in the sense of I'm still me. There's some things I need to change. God will change me. But being a Christian won't change everything. I come to Christ just as I am. And so Paul is saying, I don't get too high. I don't get too low. The past is the past, and I cannot change it. Tammy.
It's a good reminder for us as humans. We tend to rest on our laurels, as the expression goes. Yeah, I've already accomplished a lot of things, but
Yeah.
the idea is that we're still, what are we doing now, or what are we going to do?
Yeah.
In the future?
Yeah, in fact, and as we said, it'll come, I think it's later down in chapter 3, if not, because we just studied this on Wednesday night, where Paul said, I haven't obtained what I hope for yet. I've done all these things. I was these things. I became a Christian, but I haven't obtained salvation yet. That's still in the future. And so that's why I press on. Press on to the goal. And so,
Press on, it kind of implies that it's a constant working
yes.
towards something.
Yeah.
Because if you don't press on, then you're going to be stagnant and stay where you are.
Yeah. And so, yeah, as Tammy said, we can't dwell on the past to think everything we've done is accomplished and there's nothing more to do. We can't dwell on the past thinking that, well, what I've done in the past means I can't move forward in the future. Like, as far as the past is past. I do like watching television shows science fiction shows where they go back and they get to see the past. Now, good science fiction shows will come along and say you can't step into the past or you'll change everything, and that's true if you could do that. But and they always I think they call it the butterfly effect. If you step on a butterfly in the wrong spot, you can change the whole world. But we can't do that. The past is done, and so Paul warns us about that. Now on the flip side, we go, what does James say about the future? I think this one is correct. We'll come to Kala. James 4, verse 14.
Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away.
Okay, so what does James tell us about the future?
Life is temporary.
All right, so life is temporary. That's absolutely true. Life is temporary.
We have no idea what tomorrow holds.
We have no idea what tomorrow holds. Who has plans for this afternoon? No, there are people who don't have plans for this afternoon. Wow, that's quite. I wonder what you're doing. Maybe I should tag along with you. But a lot of people have plans for this afternoon. Who's planning to go to work tomorrow? If you have a job, plan to go to work tomorrow. If you're not planning to go to work, if you have a day off, you probably have plans to do with your day off, or if you're retired, you probably have plans that you're planning on doing. But what does James warn us about the future? It goes with what Gord said. And it goes with what we'll read in Luke 12 in a few moments.
Not to stress about the future.
All right. Well, Jesus said, don't stress about the future in Matthew 6. And I think I'd skip that part in my notebook because we were going to talk about it, which is good. Oh, we can talk about it now. Jesus is in Matthew 6. Don't worry about the things about tomorrow because tomorrow will have its own problems. And so we can get so stressed out. Oh, I have this big interview, or oh, this mountain of work is piled up for me. And we can get stressed in the present that we actually waste our time in the present. And so we can get stressed out about the future. We can't, just like we can't change the past, we don't hold the future either. Things change. And we need to accept that we aren't in control of the future. Just like we can't change the past, we don't hold the future in our hands. We can't bend it to our will. That's what James is telling us. You do not know what will happen tomorrow. What should we say in verse 15, which Kala can get as well if she's still there.
For that you ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or do that.
What does it mean to say if the Lord wills? What are we really asking for there?
If we're granted another day.
We're granted another
We
day.
may not wake up the next day.
We may not wake up the next day.
People die in their sleep.
Yeah, there's that. Bill, you had something as well?
I just thought too, James maybe is getting us to think that, like compared to eternity, our time here is insignificant.
Yeah. When you think about it, if you boil a pot of water on the stove, and it gets up to boiling, you're seeing the vapor come off, like as far as when it evaporates into steam. The vapor's only there for a little bit, and then it dissipates into the air. It disappears. It's there, but it disappears. That's what life is compared to eternity, and that's really what he's getting at here. Because we take a look at 80 years and say, well, that's a long time. And 80 years, yeah, that's a long time. If you live to 90 or 100, that's a long time.
But if you're at 80, you look, well,
Yeah,
you
well,
look back and say,
yeah.
wow, time flies.
Time flies. Yes, you do. Like as far as when I was 5 and I was 10, 40 looked like that's a long time away. I'm 40 now,
in
so
Maine, it's like, where did this year go so
yeah.
far?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, this year has gone by pretty quickly, but it's like a little vapor that vanishes away. Jeff, you had something.
You know, we need to keep in mind too, God has a plan for everything.
Yeah.
God's not just observing.
Yeah.
Things are going according to God's plan. Our plans may not be the same
Mhm.
as God's plans, and we need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
For example, Paul wanted to go into Bithynia.
Yeah.
While they were traveling, but it was the Lord's intention that he go to Macedonia.
Yeah.
And that's where they went.
That's where they went, and then he would say later, Satan kept me from going to Corinth. I think it was Corinth. He said it was one of the churches. Satan had hindered me from coming, and so Paul couldn't come, which is interesting as well. But we have plans, but we need to be careful that we recognize the Lord may have other plans, or other people may have other plans and things get in between. When we say, if the Lord wills, we need to be praying, if the Lord wills. We should want the Lord to will it, if the plans are good. Going and visiting brethren in far-off places, going to preach the gospel, that's good. But the Lord may have other plans that we don't know and understand. You had something, Gord?
Yeah, it's like Paul had letters in hand and planned to go to Damascus to persecute Christians. What happened on the road to Damascus?
Yeah,
He was intercepted.
his plans changed quickly.
Very quickly.
And so we have to understand about the future. The future we do not hold in our hands. now we have to go and read the parable of the rich man. Let's go to Luke 12. We'll split this up. Gord can get 16 and 17, Sandra 18 and 19, and Jeff 20 and 21 of Luke chapter 12. So the parable of the rich man that Jesus tells goes along with some of the things that we've been talking about and some of the things that we need to consider. So Luke 12, 16 to 21.
Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully, and he thought within himself, saying, What should I do, since I have no room to store my crops?
So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater. And there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry.
But God said to him, Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.
Okay, let's try not to try to look ahead in the questions. We won't try to bump ahead because we might want to answer these questions in the order that they're presented. So if you have a comment, please take a look at your questions, see if it's coming up later, and save your comment till then. So this rich man here, he had what we might say is a good problem. What problem did his really bountiful crop present him?
What should I do?
He has no room to store them.
Have no room to store it. Isn't that a great problem to have, you think, from the rich man's perspective? You sow seed, and you're expecting, like as far as when we sow, if you ever plant things, you're expecting, okay, in a good year, you'll get this much. Now maybe you've planted it and it gets more sunshine than you were expecting, or the soil's better than you're expecting, it's more rain you're expecting, and you get a lot more than you were planning. Now, if you're a farmer in this day and age, you have to think about the parable of the sower. They wouldn't plant like we plant. They would go out and cast seed into the air. It would come and land on the ground, and you had to hope it landed on good ground. Well, to have a bumper crop, you have to have a lot of your seed in proportion to the others land on good ground. And then you, of course, have to have the conditions to be able to grow it and for it to produce. This man had more than he was expecting. What decision did he make in order to solve his problem?
Build bigger barns to store his produce.
Yeah.
Then take it easy.
There's two things. There's two things. That'll be question C. His his decision was probably a decision we would make. He had a couple options. What could he have done? Leave off what his mistake was. What could he have done, Gord?
He could have given the access to the poor.
Okay, that is
And needy.
yeah.
But having said that, it wasn't wrong for him to tear down his barns and build bigger barns.
No.
It was his attitude.
Yeah, it's what comes after that's his problem. He had a problem. You aren't going to let your food rot. That would be a waste. And so Gord is exactly right. He could have come along and said, I was expecting this much. I'll give to the poor. I'll leave some, because this is Jewish, remember. I'll leave more of it behind so that the poor can glean, because they were allowed to do that. And so I could have done that. But the choice he made, that's not what he is going to be criticized for in a few minutes. Building the bigger barns. He had a problem he came up with a solution to fix it.
How many of us buy stuff on sale, put it in our freezer,
Yeah.
right, just to save a little money? That is not wrong.
No. And I said he's not, especially if you go to places like Costco, which give you a lot of food for lesser per pound price anyway. And we all do it. You go to your pantry. You're going to have more food than you're going to eat this week. We do that. especially if we find sales, because it might be more a better use of our money than buying everything in the moment. And you can't do that with fruit and vegetables. If you want fresh fruits and vegetables, they'll go bad. But other than that, you can do that with meat. You can do that with canned goods. And that's the life we live in. But this man made a mistake when it came to his time. What was his mistake?
He thought years ahead.
All right. And what was he going to do with his time?
Rest.
Take it easy.
Eat, drink, and be merry. Take it easy. Now, we're going to discuss two things when it comes to that, because you can take this the wrong way. He was going to say, of course, he must have had some expectation that his crops would always produce this way. So he probably had that. I will take my ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Or he thought, well, I have a lot of food for many years. I don't have to work now. And we'll get to what God has to say to him in a minute as to why that was a problem with how he used his time. But you might say he was going to be lazy. He decided, well, I don't need to work anymore. I don't need to work anymore. Because probably this man was not old. If he's a farmer, it didn't say at the beginning of the parable he was old and planning to retire. He was probably still of very good age to work. What did he obviously think about his life? You know, he says, I'm going to take my ease, eat, drink, and be merry. Gord.
Yeah. Well, firstly, he would be thinking that his life's going to continue.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, the next day, maybe a year later.
Yeah.
But when he's thinking that way too, he probably, if he has barns to store stuff, he had to probably have some wealth with him.
Yes.
And have people working for him. So if he does take it easy, well, what happens to the workers?
Yeah.
On top of that, they lose work.
Yeah. Well, there's
a ripple effect.
there's a ripple effect. I hadn't thought about that part, but yeah. The man is, planning ahead. We'll get to what he forgot in a second. In planning ahead was forgetting that he doesn't control his own life.
But it's not wrong to plan ahead.
No, it's not
we
wrong.
plan for the day that we can't work.
Yeah.
By saving RSPs,
Yeah.
investments. And
That's
stuff
the
like
that's the second part of this question. But because I said there were two parts to this question where people can take the wrong idea from this. But he didn't plan. He was planning everything to stay the same. He wasn't planning for the future in a good sense, because we know he is not making himself rich towards God. We know that, because Jesus would say that in verse 21. So this man wasn't going to make wise use of his time. He was going to be lazy. He was just going to sit around. He was going to enjoy his wealth. He wasn't going to work. He wasn't even going to help the poor. He wasn't going to do anything. Now, the second part of this question goes to what Gord was saying just a few minutes ago. When we get older, we plan to retire. There are some who are going to retire within the next 8 weeks. Is it wrong to retire? Why might people... But this verse says you take your ease, you eat, drink, and be merry. Jeff?
You're not retiring from life, or you shouldn't be.
No, yeah.
You're just retiring from a specific profession that you've been doing for a number of years.
Yeah. And that's the point. There's a difference between retiring from life, retiring from the church, and retiring from work. People who can retire, what does that usually mean? If you can afford to retire, what does that mean? You have obviously saved up to be able to do that. Because it would be wrong for us to retire and then just expect others to provide us food, to provide us clothing, to provide us shelter. That would be wrong. We have to eat, and we shouldn't become mooches off of other people if we have the ability to work. It's one thing if someone comes along, they can't walk, they can't work, there's something wrong that prevents them from doing that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about someone who is able to do the work, who is needing to do the work, who just refuses to work. It could be young people who decide to do that. Could be old people who decide to do that. But retiring from work usually means we have the means to be able to do that. Gord.
I have a friend that retired a few years ago from Croatia. He went back to retire in Croatia.
Yeah.
And he messaged me this morning with a video. They're at the beach and the water's all
Yeah.
nice and this. I said, God willing, when I retired, and my reply actually said, God willing, when I retire, I'd love to go visit Croatia.
Yeah.
But that was, to
Yeah.
me, the right attitude to have, because
Yeah.
it may not be God's will that I retire or I make it to Croatia.
May not be, but it's certainly a good thing to consider the Lord's will in the matter. So, if you retire from work, what does that give you time to do? To do the Lord's work. Now, that does not mean necessarily doing everything in the church. But doing the Lord's work might be helping family out. You have responsibilities to parents. You have responsibilities to your children. Now you have more time to be able to assist in those things. Some of us found out, maybe when we retired, that there was work that you didn't know you had to do for your parents or your in-laws, and you find out there's a lot more work. And now that you're retired, that you can find, that people find for you to do. But it is work that the scriptures talk about, helping parents. But we can be more active in the church.
We can assemble with the saints more often.
We can assemble with the saints. Some people are hindered through work from getting to Bible study on Wednesday night. When we retire, we should be able to make the effort to get out on Wednesday night if we have the ability to. So we are given more ability to do more things. Maybe I can be more active in teaching classes if I'm a man, or I can be more active in going out into the community and talking to people about the gospel, because even women can do that. I have more time. It's what use I make of my time that's important. And that's really the point of this parable. Retirement in and of itself is not bad as long as we don't retire from life and we don't retire from God. Jeff?
There is a message of contentment here,
Yes.
along with the time that we have in use.
Yeah.
Because this man was looking forward to a time of contentment. He seen his contentment in having a lot and having to do little.
Yes.
But Jesus specified, he could have used any man, but he said, he started the parable with a rich man. He's a rich man.
Yes.
Which means his current barns are already big enough for the needs of a rich man.
Yes.
But right, he's rich because but that wasn't enough apparently. He
Yeah.
wanted an even larger one because in his mind he seen contentment in having this great access and having whatever he wants to do to satisfy himself in his own time.
Yeah. I hadn't caught that, but that's a very good point. As far as he was already rich before the bumper crops, and now he's even more rich, and he thought, well, I must not need more. We can see that in some of the wealthy people. I'm amazed at how much wealth people actually need. Like as far as if they're doing good work with it, that's one thing, but some people just like to have more money. Bill, before we move on, yes?
Yeah, even before, as soon as he realized and had his bumper crops, it's the fact that he spoke to his soul.
Yeah.
The fact that he considered himself. He gives
Yeah.
God no credit.
Yes.
That's the first problem.
Yes.
He sits on his pride.
Yeah. That's a good point, too. That he gives thanks to God for nothing. But he is considering God in nothing, which brings us to question 3D. What did God say to him?
He's a fool.
Why?
He's a fool because he doesn't know what if he's going to live tomorrow.
Yeah, which God tells him he's not.
Yeah. So
And then what's God's point?
He's storing up treasures for himself.
He's storing up treasure for himself, and if he dies, whose will those treasures become? Whoever inherits it, you're not going to get to make use of it. And that's an important thing that we need to remember. That we might retire, might have plans for retirement, we aren't taking anything we have with us. Don't waste it. Like as far as let's not become the prodigal son and waste inheritances on frivolity. But we need to remember, we're not taking anything with us. And so if we decide we're not going to be rich towards God, we're just going to be rich in this earth, well, that's going to be a tragedy. Because we're going to show up to God naked, as it were. Paul says that in other places. You're going to stand before him naked. You have no clothing. You have no house, no food, nothing to give God and say, I want to get into heaven. But if we're clothed with Christ, we'll be fully able to get into heaven through God's grace. So, the parable of the rich man is one of the most famous parables dealing with time. Dealing with the present. The rich man can also deal with the past. He was rich already. Dealing with the present and dealing with the future. So the last question deals a lot with the present. We've dealt with the past, we've dealt with the future. What about the present? We'll come back to Bill. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2.
We then, as workers together with him, also plead with you not to receive the grace of God in vain. For he says, in an acceptable time I have heard you, and in the day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the acceptable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation.
Okay, Paul, just for your reference, is quoting Isaiah 49, verse 8, when he says, in the acceptable time I have heard you, and the day of salvation I have helped you. Isaiah was looking forward to the day of salvation. He was prophesying about it. What does Paul say about the day of salvation? Now is the time of salvation. Not tomorrow. Not even in the past. If I want to be saved, I need to start today. Because as we've learned, I'm not guaranteed tomorrow. I can't go back and change the past. I can't control the future. All I can live in is the present. An hour ago, I can't change what happened 35 minutes ago when we started. That's in the past. I can only live right now. And so if I'm not a Christian, I'm not guaranteed this afternoon. Tragedy happens. None of us expect to die today. No one does. The only people who know that they may die are the ones who have chronic disease that is terminal disease. And you know your time is short. You may not know the exact moment of your death, but there are times when we know, okay, I am going to die, and we are ready for it. But most of us aren't there. Some of us, if you turn on the evening news, you'll probably see tonight someone was murdered. Someone was hit by a car. Someone was killed in war. And like as far as, we don't expect to die. We don't, but we need to be, if there's one thing to plan for, it is our death. Because we know that's certain if Christ doesn't come first. And the only way we can plan for our death, if we want to go to heaven, is by becoming a Christian now. If I haven't believed in Jesus as the Son of God, the risen Savior, the one who reigns as King of Kings and Lord of Lords over his church, if I haven't done that, it means I also haven't recognized I'm in sin and repented of that sin. I haven't confessed that faith, and I haven't been baptized for the remission of my sins. I'm still in sin. I'm in need of salvation. I can do something about it right now. Don't come along and say, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do it when I'm ready. I've heard a lot of people who planned for a lot of things and never got around to it. Jeff.
Just a few verses earlier from 2 Corinthians 6, it's chapter 5, from 9 to 11. Paul told them that we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. I guarantee it for myself, that when I stand before the judgment seat of Christ, the things that I kind of thought were important while I lived in this lifetime are not so important when I'm standing before that judgment seat.
Yeah.
I know actually there's only going to be one thing important in my mind. Did I live with faith in Christ, and did I put in perspective all those other things?
Yeah. Walk by faith and receive God's grace. That's the only thing that's going to matter. Whether I'm rich or poor, whether I belong to a big church or a small church, did I follow Christ in faith? Did I obey Christ in faith? That's what matters. Because that's the only thing about the future we know. We will die and stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Everything else I can't control in my hands. I can do the things God wants me to do. I can make wise use of my time. And so here's some thoughts that the author has, who I'm taking the material from. So examining yourself checklist before a bell rings. Do I plan good deeds for tomorrow, but not today? Am I presumptuous about time? In other words, do I take for granted I will have tomorrow? Do I leave a place for God and the church in my time? If so, what is that place? Is it first or last? Do I feel my time is valuable? And do I spend too much time on unimportant things? That's what Jeff says. We need to make wise use of our time. Because if we don't, we will look back on our lives with regret that I could have lived a life of faith and been much more useful in God's kingdom.
I'm not ashamed to hold my